DraftKings best ball breakdown. We got Dolphins and the Ravens. This is episode 11.
We're getting close, Ellie. We're almost to the home stretch here. What is up, guys? Welcome to the Edge DFS. My name is Tyson Smith, joined by Ellie Hernandez. Ellie, we are less than a week away from that Thursday night matchup. We're getting very close to the whole Sunday slate here. We're going to be busting through quite a few of these. We're doing 2-a-days from here on out. We're trying to get the final show done for these breakdowns by Monday morning. Maybe you'll see that release as we transition into main slate talk and our usual, obviously, showdown videos. So make sure you guys subscribe to that. If you guys are listening to this on the podcast version, be sure to jump over to YouTube and subscribe to those as well. But we'll be obviously posting all of our content on all of the top podcast providers. All right, Ellie, so let's get into this pretty quick here. So Dolphins, Ravens, we waited a little bit on this because there's some news to be had. You know, we'll talk about that in the narrative side of things. But as of now, it seems like there's no Jonathan Taylor trade going to happen now. Could it happen in 2 weeks? Like, I don't know. It probably could before the trade deadline. I don't know. But we've gotten some news. Let's get into injuries actually right now since we're here. So Jeff Wilson injury is kind of the big deal. He's on like the short-term IR is what everyone's thinking. It's going to be about 4 weeks for him. He could come back after that. Thoughts on Jeff Wilson though here, because look, Mostert and Wilson and A-Chain, there was this kind of three-headed monster. Do we know who was going to get the bulk of it? You know, there was talk about Mostert and maybe Jeff Wilson are those guys with A-Chain working his way in there. Maybe they're using A-Chain in the pass game a little bit. Maybe we see some two running back, sets with both of these guys on the field at the same time. When it comes to Jeff Wilson here, his ADP is going to plummet, like absolutely plummet. You were telling me you're getting him in the 20th round at this point. So thoughts on this whole injury situation? Are you staying away from these guys still simply because we don't know if Jonathan Taylor can still get traded to this team, even though what they were asking for him, Jalen Waddle, is kind of ridiculous, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to be spending too much time getting to Raheem Mostert. I did get a little bit of exposure to him when we were doing our drafts earlier on, right? I think I kind of slowed down a little bit to the running backs just because of the Jonathan Taylor news. But Jeff Wilson, the way this situation played out is kind of interesting to me. One of our degenerate Discord members who kind of brought up some good points. Why did Wilson go on IR after cut day? And the reason is because if he goes on during preseason or before those cuts, he actually is out for the year. So now that they put him on IR after the season starts, that means he might be on the IR designated to return after 4 games. Now, the NFL doesn't have a separate designation for that. So doing it this way protects him for the rest of the season. So if you're telling me I can go get a guy who right now could end up being RB2, depending on what happens with Devon A-Chain, and even then, Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, what their thing is just not finishing a season. So there's a lot of value that you can get in this backfield still. A-Chain's dropping, Wilson's dropping because of his injury, and I think that this was played out in a way that implies that he's going to be back. I like it, man, especially in the 19th and 20th round. It's crazy where he's going.
Yeah, and I was getting to a ton of Jeff Wilson earlier. I laid off of him a little bit. I've been all over the place. I have healthy exposure to all these guys. The bad thing would be if Jonathan Taylor does get traded, it would absolutely collapse all these guys for the rest of the season. You'd have to be worried about having a lot of exposure to these guys. But also, it's probably better if you have a shitload of Jonathan Taylor that he does get traded to this team, because using up that second, third round draft pick, whatever you were using on him, is going to really hurt you a lot more than a 17th round Jeff Wilson not playing as much. All right, so the other guys, A-Chain, he's got a shoulder injury. He could miss week 1. It's possible. Yep. Is that going to stop me from drafting him? No, probably not. The one thing that would stop me from drafting him is I don't know where he fits into this offense. He could be a top 10, he could be a top 10 running back this year, or he could literally play a couple games. I just don't know. What are your opinions on that? Like, do you have a clear sense as to where you think he's going to like get his playing time?
I don't. I think he's going to get most of his run in third down situations. But at this point, like if they don't make an addition, they could just have the two running backs for a little bit, right? It might just be Mostert and A Chain. And honestly, like I'm kind of just blindly drafting him at this point because I was getting him so much earlier on. Just at a much higher ADP when he was in that 120 range, that now it's kind of just balancing out my overall exposure and getting him in a better spot. So he's fine, man. Like again, I think the biggest part of this team is what we're going to get into now. Is just really the passing game. I like both sides of both offenses there.
Yeah. So Jalen Waddle has a little rib injury. Seems like that's not a huge deal. It doesn't. It's not going to affect where I'm drafting him. I'm still drafting a shitload of him if he's there. Baltimore. J.K. Dobbins has a knee injury. You know, obviously he's coming back from a knee injury, but it seems like he's ready to go. It seems like he's through recovery and 100% as much as you can be after an injury like that. It's more of a contract issue, I think. He's got no leverage. Just show up, play, prove that you can play an entire season. Then they'll fucking pay you. You know what I mean? So J.K.
Yeah.
Dobbins is going around that range. It looks like he's going to be playing. Where's he going? He's going around 66. He's dropped down about 10 spots over the last few months. So Dobbins, are you worried about him much? What is your reaction to Dobbins? I mean, if I get Lamar, I have no problem getting Dobbins as well in that range, but usually I'll skip over him in order to get Flowers and Beckham and those guys, right?
Yeah, I like J.K. Dobbins. Yeah, I wasn't getting as much exposure earlier on just because the injury was worrying me, but he's kind of just stuck with his ADP, right? Like he hasn't necessarily gone too high or too low. So now that I feel, I kind of find I'm getting to a lot of guys that have been kind of consistent with their ADP now, right? Like, and that's how I feel about Dobbins. I'm starting to get a little bit more exposure to him. One thing I was a little concerned earlier on about the injury, and I think this is something to keep in mind. He probably is going to get a little bit more of a workhorse back type load under the new offensive coordinator. So that's good for his fantasy upside. But if his knees are garbage, then that's something to keep an eye out for. But we love Gus Edwards too, so whatever.
I'm to a fault. I'm a huge Gus Edwards fan, and I have way too much Gus Edwards. It's
Hmm.
scary. But look, I'm getting him in, where's he going? He's going in at, around pick
200.
200, 188, 200. It's not going to be the end of the world if he, there's going to be opportunity for him to have some spike weeks and to have some big games. Doesn't mean he's going to be a number one back the whole year, but if you're getting him at that price, if you can get a handful of 2 touchdown games out of him, that'd be incredible. Bateman is the other guy. He's dealing with the Liz Frank injury. He seems to be back. And the interesting thing here, let's actually switch to narratives here. So the interesting thing with him is he's like the number one dude on paper. I've heard people in camp saying, yeah, dude, Bateman's our guy. And yet he's going much later than some of these other guys. You got Zay Flowers going at pick 73 when originally he was at pick 105. I'm sure that preseason game and camp definitely boosted him up. But you're getting Odell Beckham at 102, and then you're getting Rashad Bateman at 106. On paper, Rashad Bateman's the number one guy. So, what are you thinking for the tiers of these wide receivers? A guy like Zay Flowers, when he was going around that 100 pick, and they were all kind of like bunched together right there. There was 3 dudes basically right around pick 100 that you can always get at least to one of them if you have the Lamar stack going. But now they've separated quite a bit. Are you okay with this Zay Flowers at that pick? I haven't been taking him that much at around pick 75.
I've been getting a little bit exposure to him now, just when it kind of feels right. I mean, if you're still getting him at wide receiver 4 or 5, it's just sucks that you're paying such a high price. It's still an awkward range in general, but I don't feel like the market's balanced out with Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman, right? Like those two did not move at all, really. and Zay Flowers is still up 30 picks, right? So I would expect him to kind of come back a little bit more, and maybe at least Rashad Bateman to even out. But at this point, like when this is round 10, this is around 9 or 10. I have 5 wide receivers now. Probably none of them are a Raven, so I have no problem grabbing a bunch of Rashad Bateman at this range. I have 13% Zay Flowers. I actually have 13% Rashad Bateman now. And that's because I've been getting a decent amount of him right here in this range instead of reaching for Flowers, man. If you were if you're drafting earlier, you can see you're getting Flowers in the same range at 105. So, but I like Rashad Bateman. I think this is a really good opportunity for him to have a big year.
So, speaking of that, the pass game for the Ravens, they got a new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. So, to me, I mean, this is a college guy coming into the NFL. I believe he was in the NFL in the past, so there is a track record there, but I don't know a whole lot about him. All I know is that this offense is going to be a little bit more dynamic and less like it was before during the Hollywood Brown days, as we all know about getting Hollywood Brown to the Cardinals. So anyways, there is an opportunity for some more pass yards to be had here and less relying on Lamar to just be a running back as people have been calling him. Anything else to talk about here? Or you want to get into breakdown?
Let's get into it.
All right, let's do this. Break it down. All right, so breakdown, Tyreek Hill going at pick 4. I grab him like I've said on all these shows. I typically, unless I'm in the 8, 9, 10 range, sometimes I'll mix things up. I'm taking the highest guy available for me, anybody who's past ADP or at ADP, because I'm doing so many different drafts. And Tyreek Hill is a guy I've been getting to quite a bit. He's going at pick 4. You can turn around and then get Jalen Waddle here. How often are you doing this? Like, what happens? Okay, I got pick 4. Most likely going to get Tyreek Hill. You get Tyreek Hill. What are you thinking after that? You're thinking, shit, I want to get a Week 17 run back, or can I get to Lamar? Do I want to stack up Tyreek Hill and Waddle and then get a Tua lineup going with maybe, a later guy from Baltimore? Where are you going? Because I know you have a shitload of these stacks, as do I, but I think you have a lot more. And so what happens when you draft Tyreek Hill here? What are you thinking?
So there's a couple different directions you can go. I think the most obvious is Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Waddle falls into a range where it's kind of just Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and a couple other running backs. So I really don't hate just going Jalen Waddle. Now the one thing that you do have to consider, very similar to the Cincinnati premium stack, is you're spending a first and a second round pick on 2 dudes from the same team. So yeah, it's great, but you also need to shore up your wide receiver depth a little bit here. So the other thing is on that back end of round 3, you're what you be closer to the beginning. My apologies, but anyways, you have the option to look at Mark Andrews or Lamar Jackson. And I think one thing that I'm starting to realize as I draft this stack so much is just how easy it is to go 2-1 with Miami and Baltimore here, with 2 Miami and then 1 Baltimore. Earlier on, it was a little bit, you could get Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson sometimes if you wanted to run it back. It's almost impossible to get right now, unless you're one of our buddies in the chat who's gotten it 2 or 3 times in the past week. But unless you're able to get something like that, like I feel like you're kind of starting to fall into a pretty predictable like range with these 3 picks. So one thing that I've been doing to mix it up a little bit is I'm going Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then reaching a little bit for Lamar. And then kind of just doing that stack because again, on the Baltimore side, after you get past these top 3 guys, like even Zay Flowers now, there's just so many other guys that you can use to stack with them kind of later on. Even then, right, I don't mind waiting to round 10, 9 or 10 to get to Rashad Bateman as my one guy with Lamar.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, even doing a Tyreek Hill and Mark Andrews or a Waddle Andrews,
Yep.
just by themselves, and then waiting to see if I can get Tua, where Tua is a guy that he gets reached on a lot. His ADP is at 92. Like sometimes you could see him go in the 70s. Sometimes he falls to like pick 110. I think that's why his ADP is there, because you either have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and you really want Tua, which ends up happening and people reach for him, or nobody really wants him and he drops into the hundreds. So Tua to me is a guy that I just don't get to a lot because I feel like he's getting reached on quite a bit, and it's a situation with like a lot of these quarterbacks that we see they're what is it, Josh Allen or Burrow? Specifically Burrow. Burrow's going around pick 46. The main reason he's going around pick 46 is because that's when the guys who get Jamar Chase and T Higgins can draft them. So it's a similar situation here with Tua. I don't have a lot of him. I have a lot more Lamar Jackson, but like you said, getting Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as your first couple picks, your top two wide receivers are coming from the same team potentially. I don't hate that though necessarily because there's a reason why these are the only two wide receivers really getting drafted on this team. You got Cedric Wilson, Braxton Berrios going at the end of the draft. These two guys are both 1,000-yard wide receivers. They're both like number one type wide receivers, and a lot of the volume is going to go to them. So I don't hate it, but I agree with what you're saying. It's kind of scary to get both of these guys. But look, if Jalen Waddle goes down and you have Tyreek Hill, yeah, you're losing out on a Jalen Waddle draft pick there, which sucks. But man, Tyreek Hill is going to be an absolute smash there. So who else are you looking at here, man? I'm going to let you just riff a bit and talk about some of your exposures here. And then we'll kind of get down into some of these later round guys that we want to target.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Lamar is kind of the most interesting one. I've got 14%. He's one of my higher owned quarterbacks. Look, man, I just don't know. Like, if you have Josh Allen going ahead of him, even Patrick Mahomes, the one thing that people sleep on is Lamar's ability to not take hits and score rushing touchdowns. So like he's not these other quarterbacks where he's out here running around getting smashed. He's up the sideline doing some finesse thing, getting out of bounds, picking up 15 yards, and then getting a touchdown on the drive. So, look, I think Lamar Jackson's an important guy to get some exposure to, especially there in at the beginning of the third round. Outside of that, man, like I think Rashad Bateman is probably my most interesting guy. He's the one guy that I said that I had a little bit more exposure. 13% right now. I'm probably going to keep getting a little bit more exposure to him. It's just too easy to kind of get him as a one-off stack with him and Miami. If you end up with Hill or Waddle, or even if you want to do something crazy and just stack him as a one-off with Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert. Now, I don't want to get too out of pocket here, but another guy that nobody is talking about that again has to be involved in the offense to some extent is Durham Smythe. He is going to be the starting tight end for Miami.
Yeah.
He is absolutely free.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, like if we're like obviously Jake Ferguson, Lucas Musgrave, whoever, all these people, right? All these other tight ends, Michael Mayer, they might be in a little bit better situation, but you also aren't going to have many other tight ends who have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill run on the outside of them. There might be nobody covering him just because they fucking can't. Yeah. So like I like him. He's free. I've been running him back with some of my Baltimore stacks as of late. I think I only have 2 or 3 lineups with him, but I'm probably going to get a few more as a tight end 3 or 4.
I mean, Smythe is a guy that could have 400 yards, 30 receptions, 400 yards, and like 7 touchdowns because he's like a red zone beast. I don't know what to think about Smythe, but why is as a starting tight end on a pretty damn good offense, why is he going at pick 230? I feel like I'm missing something.
Right, and the other thing that really matters now is the player pool has been cut in half since cuts, right?
Oh, yeah.
You went from roster sizes of 90 to 53. So now you have to start being really careful at some of these deeper picks in these last rounds. And Durham Smythe might be the guy that you have to start taking now.
Absolutely. So another tight end to talk about is Isaiah Likely going up around pick 210. He's going towards the end of the draft. He's like a free guy that I like to grab as a one-off. If I'm looking for that tight end depth, because usually, look, let's just be honest, I'm either getting an elite tight end, the second tier tight end, or I'm just waiting to the end of the draft and I'm going like a 3-punt tight end build. Isaiah Likely is a nice three tight end punt type guy. Or if you're just trying to get depth and you don't need any correlation, fine. What are your thoughts on Isaiah Likely here? I know you're a huge fan of his. I mean, what are the they're going to be running two tight end sets, and look, Mark Andrews does have a history of getting injured for a couple games here and there. You can get a big spike week out of him. That'd be huge.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it last year. He had a couple two touchdown games. I think it was two or three, maybe it was two. But I like Isaiah Likely. He's going to get his opportunities, and again, he is an injury away from being probably the tight end 3 or 4 in all of football. So, yeah, I get him. He is also fairly free. He's going in what, round 18 or 19. Like by then, you should have a little bit of tight end depth, and if not, you're doing a punt tight end build, then that honestly might even be a perfect option to go with.
All right, so let's talk about like these wide receivers from Miami. Wide receiver three is non-existent almost. You got Cedric Wilson, you got Braxton Berrios, you got some of these guys that really aren't getting drafted at all. Now I think they will be a lot more, like you said, because with after cut day, you start to scroll down at the end of the draft, and there's just nobody that you really can use. You used to have to scroll way down to find guys, and now you're just like, all right, that's it. I got nobody else. I feel like Cedric Wilson, Braxton Berrios, these kind of guys will start getting drafted a little bit more. But look, you have Cedric Wilson's a number 3 on paper. Braxton Berrios number 4. You could flip flop with them. Are you getting to any of these guys to kind of finish up your stacks with Miami? Because look, let's just be honest. If you don't start heavy with Miami and you get to you might not have really anybody else to grab as like a pure pass catcher from Miami.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually where I'm looking at a little bit more Durham Smythe. This offense is just so close ended. Well, now you can get Jeff Wilson in these late rounds, and I think he'll slowly continue to slide until people realize that the IR things are potentially only 4 weeks. But anyways, I don't know that I'm reaching. There's just this is a weird year. There's just so much other value I think that's still available in these rounds that taking too many risks on guys like Braxton Berrios is a little crazy. Now, if out of this group, if there was somebody that I was looking at, I think it would probably be you know Cedric Wilson, then Nelson Aguilar, and maybe Devin Duvernay. Outside of that, like I don't know that I'm getting anybody in this range. I just don't trust anybody. And those aren't even Miami people. So if you're looking to fill the Miami stack, it's really not helpful.
Look, we all know about Aguilar. He has some upside. We saw
Yeah.
him in Vegas. Yeah, he got kicked out of Philly for dropping the ball too much. From what I've heard earlier in camp, now that could have changed now with Zay Flowers. Is Nelson Aguilar like on paper is like the number 3 guy? Now that might have changed. But like, are we forgetting about Nelson Aguilar? I mean, Devin Duvernay has some upside because of his kick and punt return abilities. I'm not drafting a guy because of that, obviously. But we've
Yeah.
seen Duvernay step up as a wide receiver in the past when needed. They drafted him. He's one of these guys that can do a lot of different things. If you had to choose between Duvernay and Aguilar in your stacks here, I'm not grabbing these guys as one-offs ever. But if you had to choose between either one of these dudes, who are you going with?
I actually do have Aguilar. I don't have any Duvernay. I think it's only one. Yeah, I have one lineup with Nelson Aguilar. Look, man, I think that one was back in May, and I don't mind risking it. Right? Lamar Jackson is a much better quarterback, and I think people forget about Nelson Aguilar. As soon as he left the fucking Carson Wentz Eagles, he actually started catching balls. Remember, he had like a couple breakout games with the
Yeah,
Raiders,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden he's an actual NFL wide receiver. So, maybe we attribute too much of that to him when he had Carson Wentz back there, Prince Harry.
Yeah. All right, let's okay, so last thing to talk about is Gus Edwards. What's your exposure to him? I've got like 18% Gus Edwards. It's disgusting. A lot of that came when we were kind of up in the air on J.K. Dobbins as to what his contract status was going to be, but I'm still grabbing him. He's moved up a little bit, about 6 picks. Thoughts on Gus Edwards, because I'm kind of scared. On paper, I don't even know that he's like the second. Who's the other guy? Like, they're using Justice Hill as that number 2 guy potentially.
Yeah,
So
maybe.
I'm kind of scared about Gus Edwards. Please comfort me.
Yeah, dude. I mean, look, especially he's like the zero running back darling. I mean, he has the potential to be another Kenneth Gainwell, right? And like I don't know, man. I think he's fine. He's an injury away from being a workhorse back as well. And even then, like it makes sense to kind of limit what J.K. Dobbins is doing. If it's a 65-35 split, then I don't see any reason why we wouldn't want decent exposure to Gus. And I have 15% myself, so there you go.
All right, so talk to me about this lineup you sent me here. This is a Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mark Andrews lineup, and you got Tua, you got Odell. Looks like you ended up with some Mike White at the end. Now that's something interesting to talk about because who's the backup here? If Tua goes down, is it Skylar Thompson or Mike White? Probably Mike White. I don't have an answer for that. Somebody in the comments maybe can help me out. Do you have an answer for that, Ellie?
I do not in this particular lineup. I'm betting that it's Mike White though, and I'm really betting, or maybe it's Colt McCoy. Maybe they decided to bring him in off of waivers or something.
You're hoping, yeah, you're hoping.
Yeah, but no, I thought it was a good. I think it's a good strategy in this particular case, right? Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, you got so much draft equity into those wide receivers, and then you're including, the Baltimore run back. You don't have Lamar, but you have Tua, who has an injury of histories, right? Like the history of injuries. That there's a potential that Mike White or Skylar Thompson, whomever, will get an opportunity to ball out. And I do think it is Mike White, man. We saw what he did with the Jets. So, like, I think he'll be fine in the backup role. But, yeah, man, I like this one. Obviously, it's a little earlier on when Dante Foreman wasn't as expensive, or was a little more expensive. Same with Jerome Ford. But, it is what it is. I like the stack, though.
Yeah, Foreman and Ford definitely fell, and Zeke. This was before he got signed, I'm assuming here. And look, this is one of the downsides, obviously, of drafting early. But an upside would be getting Zeke Elliott in the 16th round, at 44 picks, later. But you got a guy like Colt McCoy, which, as Cardinals fans, I never thought for a damn second that Colt McCoy would not be the starting guy, or maybe he was, or maybe be tuned, but not would he getting released. Like, I never thought that would happen. Hey, shit, you might get a Colt McCoy as a backup Patriot. You might get a little Zeke Elliott Colt McCoy stack here. Anyways, let's move on here to our final thoughts. This is a set of teams that I'm getting to a ton. I'm getting to a ton of the Ravens. If you can get the Mark Andrews Lamar stack somehow, even if you have to reach a little bit, it might be a good idea now, since nobody's really getting to it with the time period we're drafting in. If that's a lower owned type of stack, could help you as you get to the playoff rounds. What are some other thoughts to talk about here before we send it off?
Just real quick, we spend a lot of time talking about stacking, but if you're doing a bunch of entries, make sure you're diversifying. Don't have all your Tyreek Hill lineups be tied to Jalen Waddle and Tua.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a lot of equity tied up into one. And if you are going to do that, consider doubling down. That's kind of my point with the Mike White side. Right? If Tua goes down and that's what you have, then you're probably fucked anyways. So maybe bet on his backup crushing. Yeah. So that's really kind of just my theory, my strategy. If anybody has any ideas on that, feel free to chop it up in the Discord. We like discussing this stuff. We only got a week and a half left?
Yeah, barely. Not even. We got 8 days, I think.
Damn.
So, yeah, that's a very good point as we wrap this up is I like to check, as you could see that spreadsheet we popped out, I'm entering as I'm drafting. I like to be on the desktop drafting. Sometimes I'm okay on my phone, but on the desktop drafting, I could see everything that's going on. I'm entering it. I can also look back. As soon as I get Tyreek Hill, I can go, look, all right, I'm in the $3 tournament. How many other Waddle Tyreek Hill lineups do I have in this particular $3? Oh, I've got a shitload. Okay, I'm going to skip Waddle this time around. Now, look, if Waddle drops to the next round, well, then of course I'm going to take him at that point. But Waddle's not a guy that never really drops. So it was a very good point that you were bringing up because you just don't want to be locked in to the same 2 or 3 guys on these stacks. You want to mix it up a little bit. All right, we will see you guys. Probably going to release one late tonight. So get ready for 2-a-days here as we wrap this up. Subscribe, follow. We're going to have a ton more content for DFS wise as Best Ball wraps up. We'll see you guys later.